Yeah. So I'm curious, yeah, other thoughts or questions that you had towards me based on episodes that you'd listened to, or yeah, previous discussions that have been had on the podcast.
Oh, I'm trying to think now. I think we mostly covered it from what we were talking about just now. But how often? Well, it's that you sort of mostly answer this, I think. But like I said, you don't really you generally ask questions, and you're sort of happy for people to pick apart. It must have been non-Christians, and then a part of that coming from, I guess, the society is like based on Christianity. Like that's people are sort of, I guess, attacking a lot of your beliefs. So it feels like that must be tough.
I
That
just
must be tough to have to do. I don't know how you manage to do it, like podcast after podcast.
signing up for just a beating every time.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's because I do long to know what is true, and it is it is painful to be confronted with what you think is true might not be true. Um, but I think that's why it's so important to hear other people's stories. It's like that again, that plausibility thing. Like it's just so easy to have kind of like a stereotype of the other until you
yeah,
actually meet somebody who believes those things. It's like, wow, okay, I could see where they came from. Um, so that's a little bit of like why I want to do this. I have friends on both sides, and I don't know if a lot of Christians have, non-Christian friends and non-Christians to Christian friends, especially like kind of in the improv world. It's like maybe there are people that were maybe quietly believing, but I would
yeah,
say predominantly like people were more yeah irreligious and rational thinking um
yeah,
and then in my nav world they would never dream of being like in the improv world and so that for me already is just a sad thing. It's like you guys should know each other, um but it's really easy for each of those to become echo chambers.
yeah.
um yeah, I don't know, have you has it felt like I'm um getting torn down or something, or that my thought.
No, not really. You always seem you're very like calm and happy about it. There was like once or twice where I think you would literally say, "Okay, this is pretty tough to talk about this or to listen to this or something." But yeah, but apart from
Mm,
that, it's like, yeah, not
yeah,
at all. I think if the things was reversed where you were just confronting me about my beliefs for like 2 hours, I think I would have a harder time just sort of staying cool about it.
yeah, yeah.
Because
Well,
it's not just like being told you're wrong about the capital of Uruguay. It's sort of core beliefs. Yeah,
right.
they're harder to sort of even think about. Yeah,
Totally. Totally. Yeah. No, and I mean, for the most part, I think it's that respectfulness, but it can also err on, everything's cool.
yeah,
You just said is cool, and what I just said is cool, even though they're like completely not coherent together.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And that's also what I'm trying to avoid on the podcast too. Like, well, I don't necessarily, yeah, I don't think that. Like, yeah, you can't, some things can't coexist. And so that's the part I'm trying to grow in, is how to actually lean into that conflict a little bit more.
yeah. Fair enough. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And with Sadomini, one of my guests, um, we were talking about how she was asking me like, hey, what kind of things have changed as you've been doing these podcasts? And,
mm.
um, but you kind of almost need confrontation to fully change. If someone's just like, well, here's what I believe, and I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, yeah,
But until they actually like say what you just said isn't right or isn't true, or it's
yeah,
or these things you're missing, that's when it actually forces me to confront what I'm saying.
yeah,
So I see it as valuable. I don't love it. So I kind of like the cheery, like, yeah, we're all
yeah,
thinking things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No one really loves it, do they? Like confronting what their core beliefs. But I think we have to. Sometimes we have to suck it up and do it. I sort of feel now because, like I said, I've sort of had the same basic beliefs for sort of like over 20 years now,
Mm,
and it's sort of making me a little bit uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I've got to find something that I believe, which there's got to be something I believe that's not true that I should find out about. But yeah, but of course I'm still uncomfortable. Like even Sam Harris, I don't know. I find him a little bit irritating. But most of this, actually I don't agree with that much, except that we have the same religious beliefs, I think.
Really?
But I'm sort of uncomfortable listening to it because I just find him so irritating. But I guess that's part of this problem,
Huh.
the weakness that maybe I have, that you don't have that, listening to people who disagree with me fundamentally. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. What?
I'm trying to think. Well, yeah, what I
What is it about little Sam that rubs you the wrong way?
what is it? It's really hard to articulate, actually. But I think a lot of his beliefs, a lot of maybe not the beliefs, but a lot of the way he says things, they seem like quite rational, but they're sort of like a simplistic rationalization. Like you'll take lots of little things, and and then I think I haven't listened to so much of it, but but maybe I need to listen to more, because I think maybe his politics is quite different to mine. He's more of that libertarian sort of thing, isn't he? Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah. Ashley, what would you say? Well, so I'm just thinking about what you just said about how like you're feeling a bit like comfortable, maybe in your beliefs. Are there areas that you're unwilling to look into, that you really like? I would rather not redig that up or look into that.
Well, I'd say in theory, no, there isn't. But there's probably certain things that I'd have to sort of be pushed to really look into it for long enough to, for it to be a real threat to my beliefs. It's tough though. I think maybe for me, I guess, because I don't have religious beliefs, in a way I feel safe with that. I don't know if there's nothing that could be said to me about the religion that could really change my mind, at least quickly. But maybe political beliefs I do hold probably more strongly. And I would like to sort of not do that, but it's quite hard, because I get agitated when I hear people with opposite beliefs. The big problem we have now is, of course, there's most of the beliefs on either side that you hear are the extreme versions, so they're easy to dismiss. Yeah. So this is an example. I don't care about it that much, but like the American gun thing about, American gun, say it's like a hot button topic. It's not my country, so I can walk away and I don't care. But when I hear like arguments for guns, they're mostly just like crazy people saying, like, I'm like, I think America should limit the guns to some degree. It's sort of admirable in a way that people have a right to bear arms, but it seems a bit crazy given everything else. But I could be wrong about that. Maybe the current system, which has survived all attempts to break it down, is totally reasonable. But I don't hear too many. A little bits of it, but yeah. But of course, you normally hear from the crazy people.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating.
I'm not that interested to talk about the gun thing, to be honest, but that's just an example of
Look, you mentioned that. What's that like in Australia? Is it no guns?
In Australia, we had it used to be like there wasn't easy access to guns. Like you could go buy them. You could even buy semi-automatics, for the terminology. Where I didn't even know that until there was a big massacre where a guy got a whole bunch of AR-15s, I think, and walked around the town killing people, and he killed like 50 people. And then I think in like a month's time, they had banned all semi-automatics in Australia. The government just bought them all off everyone who owned one and melted them down. And now you can still buy guns for basically if a farmer needs. You can buy like pistols and rifle, like single action rifle. My terminology are wrong, but just sort of rifles that a farmer will need or something, or even sports shooting, but not guns that the army has, basically. Yeah, but also the cultural view of it is quite different as well. Even though people can buy pistols, most people don't have one.
Um, hmm.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, and this is interesting because politics is your worldview applied,
Yeah.
and so the way you can look at maybe somebody's individual political views and start to get a bigger picture of maybe how they see the world. Um, in that vein, what how would you articulate your political beliefs more kind of in a grand narrative? Like, how do you see um, humanity? How should we treat each other? What role should government play in that? Um,
Yeah. If I had to say simply, I would say I'd sort of like a classical, what do you call it? Like a liberal social democratic socialist or something like that. So basically the model you have in Europe and Australia,
hmm,
even yeah. So where there's sort of like uh, in a way, I'm not beholden to any particular political philosophy, but I think capitalism is actually fine in moderation. But there's no one political philosophy which can solve the whole of human existence. So you can't go
totally.
too crazy with it. There's like, yeah, if you have pure capitalism, there's just some people, in my view, some people are always going to just end up with everything,
Hmm,
just like the game Monopoly
hmm, hmm,
shows. Yeah.
hmm,
So to me, it seems that the best thing at the moment is to have like a semi-free market and a social safety net. And
hmm,
then I guess I must, yeah, but then with, I guess, like freedom of speech and stuff like that,
hmm.
maybe.
Okay, and so then with freedom of speech,
Yeah.
how does that intermingle with religious freedom? Um, and especially in societies where the social cohesion is not going as well because of the competing ideas. I mean, you kind of see this a little bit in Europe, like
Yeah, like
um,
France is probably a really good example of that.
for sure.
Yeah, that's what makes it tough because France, in a way, is like all about liberalism. Yeah, but then they have a lot of problems because of the ghettoization and stuff like that. Yeah, how do you solve that? I don't really know. Although I think a lot of the simple narrative is that there's the Muslims on one side and then the secular things, which is like Catholic culturally, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
the Catholic has some power, but most people don't care at all.
Mm-hmm.
Them against the Muslims, but most of the secular laws against it aren't particularly liberal. They're like telling women what they can wear, or what they can't wear. They can't wear burqas. They can't do this. They can't do that. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
it sort of seems against liberal ideas.
Right.
Yeah, it's not. There's no simple solution. It's not like they just have to not do that.
And would you and so then are you in favor of government pulling back some of religion's grip in order to
uh,
create more safety or equality or
yeah, it depends what the religion's grip is. I guess. I guess. Yeah. I would. I like. How would I say? I think. Maybe it's like with like everything. If you just count religion as like any other thing in society, that you should have the most power, the most freedom to do whatever you want, as long as you're not impinging on anyone else's freedom.
hmm,
And so the easy thing is, well, like it's fine to wear a burqa, but you shouldn't be able to tell your wife or your daughter to wear a burqa. It's easy to say in principle, but in practice, it's
right.
not. And then if you have a law, I guess, saying, well, you can't tell your wife to wear a burqa, or your daughter to wear a burqa. There's a law enforcing that to stop men forcing their daughters, as already happening in Germany and Denmark. Should there be a law to stop Jewish parents circumcising their children? And that's
Right.
where it gets quite difficult.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's always complicated. There's no easy, like you said, applying a philosophy to human existence. So there's always going to be. It's never going to be clear.
Hmm.
And maybe that's what a slight difference between politics and religion is, that most religions make absolute truth claims, and Some politics does, but it's mostly just about, well, this is what we want.
Hmm.
It's harder to argue someone out of wanting something, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when politics is often trying to be more like is the word egalitarian, like where they're trying to do the most amount of good for the most amount of people.
Yeah.
It's the wrong term. Um,
Yeah.
but that is often sometimes maybe at the expense of some little minority that's trying to hold out for their
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
for the one thing. Hmm.
Yeah, but and then I think there's the things at the extremes, but then there's also the most of the stuff in the middle, which maybe is where less of the news gets talked about, because the extremes are interesting, but there's still a lot of work to be done in the middle. And I sort
Mm-hmm.
of feel like politics are, well, we don't want to make this a political podcast, but a lot of the politics at the moment is at the extremes, and in the middle there's nothing happening.
Yeah. I mean, is there something that you're wondering about what I might believe on it to find some more of that middle ground?
I was wondering, I talked about how I felt at least that my Christian upbringing informed my politics.
Hmm.
But then I don't know, it could as well, of course, be that that was just me. And then there was like everyone else in my cast was like, very right wing or something, center or
Hmm.
whatever. I don't think that's 100% true, but I'm sure there was a variation. But I'm curious about how in the 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 navigators, or call them, like the sector,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the branch of Christianity you come from, how does that affect religion? Like, do they tend to be of the same religious bent, or is it
Hmm.
just does the organization itself make political pronouncements?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. So within the navigators, no.
Mm.
They really try to just say, so they call themselves an interdenominational Christian organization. So they'll work with any denomination, especially when it's revolving around
Mm.
students. Like, doesn't matter if you were raised Catholic or you're raised
Yeah.
Lutheran or Orthodox or whatever. And yeah, and then they're really trying to find that balance of so they don't play any sort of game of like this is how you should vote, or there's like a really wide berth of
Yeah.
political views and within the navigator community. So the thing that unites us is wanting to help people understand who Jesus is
Yeah.
and learn to live like him. So that's kind of nice that
Yeah.
it's not a, and I think you see that a lot with like organizations. Of course, though, there's a lot of pressure in today's society, especially when it comes to like race, to take a stance. Like, are you on this side? Are you on this side? Or
Yeah.
and to be a bit proactive on issues. But politics, they really try to stay out of.
Okay, sure. But then, do you worship at the Navigators, or you belong to a branch where
Right.
you're getting your theology or something from? And
Yeah. So here we're part of a local church at the Vondelkirk, and it's called Liberty Church. And it's like an international, um, church. Um, so I've never necessarily been a part of a church that's like super vocal about its
okay,
politics. Um,
yeah, because I think, to be honest, I think of American churches as political because so much of American politics is based on the church, isn't it? Yeah. And I guess
yeah.
that's a prejudice of mine. So I always wonder when I meet like a religious American how much that's a part of
Mm,
it. To be honest, yeah,
yeah. Interesting. No, yeah. I mean, so I would say for sure my religion shapes a lot of
yeah,
my political views. Um, yeah, yeah. So like I would probably be more on the limited government side of things, but I don't necessarily know if that's from my Christianity or if that's from like my uh, ge- geographical upbringing. So
yeah,
if you're from more of a city in America, you tend to be more blue leaning, Democrat leaning,
yeah, yeah,
the American version of liberal. Um, and part of me wonders is it just informed by the amount of people and space that I'm used to operating under? So when I think about guns, um, it's because I am used to a family space and like state. We're from Colorado where um, there's a lot more of the functionalness of
yeah,
guns versus a place like Massachusetts where it's super densely populated and guns becomes a very very scary thing. But yeah. So I have definitely a strong sense that like some prejudices against the government, of it being like more on the inefficient side of things. If you try to centralize control into one area, like
Yeah.
things are going to get missed, and so the more localized you can get government, that's, I think, and that goes all the way down to the family. So I think the family should have the most power,
Yeah.
then to municipality, state, and then federal on the back end. And so I think that's a big one of the divides in America, that, and especially on moral issues, I think the government should not be making moral decisions. But then I was talking to one of my Dutch friends out here, and he said, no, he really thinks that the government is the moral force that should keep things accountable. And so I thought
Yeah.
that was interesting.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. It's funny because I think, and it's funny how you say it. It's interesting. Uh, yeah, it's a cohesive political philosophy you just explained, and I definitely I can sort of agree with. But it's a yeah, I can understand
So,
that.
so then
But it's funny that you say it comes from the religion, because in a way I think of that's like a very American philosophy that you said, and I think Christians in Russia think of Christianity as saying that the government should be big, and I think Christianity in Europe think of it's like the limited government thing. It feels like something that maybe what I was talking about before with the Germans and the pagans, and that it's like you got the cultural thread of limited government based on the history of America and geography and that
right.
linking up with the Christianity, and I think just like I do with the background of Australia, the history of Australia, and how I attach the Catholicism that I grew up with to my left leaning things, because of course
Right.
there's plenty of horrible right. Sorry, I shouldn't say that even like that. But I mean, there's right leaning politics that have been supported by the Catholic Church, and also horrible right leanings like Franco and some of the South American ones. Yeah. I'm not saying that like the right wing of politics is horrible, but just this is extreme, just like this horrible left wing politics.
Yeah. Qualify.
Extreme versions on both sides.
Right. Well, and I was just to that point, a friend who was from Belarus, and he's now studying here. I didn't know this, but I guess in countries that were formerly more Orthodox or raised so this is like Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. He talked about this idea of symposium. Let me just see if I can find his text. But he talks about symphonia, that the church and state needed to be fused. So this is maybe more the Orthodox view, dating way back to the original church, even potentially, which is maybe different from the traditional Catholic view that they should be distinct. So like have kind of like their own spheres or things that they're responsible for, but can still be united. And this is certainly seen in the Pope, who talked about the sword and the cross in his two different hands. I don't remember what Pope it is, but then it's a distinctly Protestant idea that they should be separate. And so then you can see, so Russian Orthodox, there's probably a lot more okayness with the government handling things. And then you take America, and especially like Massachusetts, which is one of our first kind of like really beacons of, I don't know, Americanism, where they really Protestant thought started getting pushed out. Separation of church and state is like a very hardline kind of thing.
Yeah.
Similar actually here in Netherlands, that they really prize that.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So I think I see roots of that in my philosophy.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Ashley, one of the things I also wanted to chat about is raising a kid, and how we can talk all day long about things that we are thinking about, but when you have a kid, you have to teach them how to be a good human. What is ethics? What is good? What's wrong? How to treat people. And so how have you handled that with your boy?
Yeah, it's interesting. At the beginning, you're just sort of in survival mode, I think, so you don't have to think about it too much.
I'm right there.
But then And then, okay, I'll just say that. I'll just say the things as they come to me. The first maybe confrontation of it was at the talk of baptism, because because this might sound crazy, but me and my wife had never really talked too much about our religious beliefs until our son was born, and we still haven't. In a way, it's like not something.
Huh.
Like I'm really interested in religion, and she really knows it. And then I've talked to her a little bit. She just doesn't seem that interested in religion. So
Huh.
we don't ask her about it. Uh, so anyway, but then we were getting some pressure from her French grandparents. To when is he getting baptized? And I was like, oh, okay, this is a thing. And then I think, okay, what do I want to do about this? Like, yeah, to me, it's a ritual. There's no sort of what's the word?
Reason for it or something.
Oh yeah, but it doesn't affect anything. There's no like I don't even know what is the effect in. Anyway, yeah, if he gets water on his head, it doesn't hurt him
Right.
in any way. Yeah, but
Okay,
but then in a way, I also sort of feel, oh, maybe I don't want to seem disingenuous, and I don't want to give the authority to this guy I don't know who belongs to this system of thought, which I just don't think is true.
Mm.
So but then do I really care enough about that to upset other people? So that was a little tough little thing, but in the end, I think Vero said, "Oh no, we're not going to do that." So,
Okay.
and that's when I realized, okay, she didn't want to do it either, so she was enough against it to So that was just an interesting little thing about how to a confrontation of, I guess, sectarianism with, I guess, with like non-religion being another sect. So that's just that, which isn't really ethical or anything like that. And then apart from that, I think I try to mostly just do the ethics and stuff by example. Like I really just try to not tell him things and just do it by example as much as I can. Sometimes you can't do that. And then try to, it's funny because I found sometimes I would think I'd have to say, oh, well, if you did that to this guy, how would he feel if that happened to you? That sort of thing. But it turns out my son seems quite empathetic. And so it's not something I even actually have to, it's nothing I have to actually teach him, which is sort of good, I guess. And I don't know if that's just how he is, or maybe he's seeing my empathic behavior, because I feel like I'm fairly high on the empathy score, sort of almost annoyingly sometimes.
Oh, interesting.
And then he's still only 5, so he's sort of just getting out of the just reacting to things phase, where you just got to give him rules just to stop him being hurt, and there's just starting with the more sort of the bigger questions.
And how did you guys handle like discipline or like with rules? How do you?
Yeah. To me, this doesn't really have anything to do with. I mean, you mean like ethical stuff, or just mean like rules in general about? I don't know. Yeah, I think I was raised, I think, fairly easygoing, and so I try to keep I try to like only close the borders at the sort of last minute, okay, I'll let him have as much freedom, and say, and I hear you can't do that because you'll hurt yourself, or you can't do that because you'll upset this person. Yeah, and then, like I say, just modeling the behavior, and hope he sees that. Mostly works. I mean, of course, there's things like brushing his teeth. He's just got to brush his teeth, and I just try to exercise as much patience as I can. Sometimes you yell, whatever. It's tough, especially when you're tired, which is most of the time. Yeah, but I really just try to patience, and then just persistence.
And then stories. Have you told him any biblical, like, would that ever come up, or stories you read to him? Is it just kind of things that you have been given to you, or maybe there's just not much thought to it of some of the moral lessons or narratives that we want to read to him like, I guess when we start to think about our girl, when she's maybe around 5, but we would have like a kid's Bible or something, so we'd show him the different stories or show her.
Sorry, the last thing I heard was stories. Have you ever read in biblical stories?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was just wondering, like, how do you pick what stories to read to him?
Yeah, we have so many books in the house of just different stories about animals and plants, and he has little things about wizards and
Huh?
witches and whatever, octopuses that talk and stuff. Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, I'd be interested to read him biblical stories. To be honest, I think most biblical stories aren't appropriate for children.
There's some crazy ones. It's for real.
Yeah, and even some of the ones, like, to me, Noah's flood is a horrendous story. It has a lot of like nice little images, and I would feel even uncomfortable now. Just, I know there's children's versions of it, but I wouldn't want to tell him. I wouldn't want to give him a story that sort of glosses over a genocide at this
Hmm.
age, if you
Hmm.
know what I mean.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean,
Totally makes
I'll
sense.
definitely tell them about the stories when they're age appropriate, because, like I said, yeah, and I'm sure there's some ones that are just good for kids. I feel awful just, yeah, I don't mean to be sort of, I don't want to be unfair, but yeah,
Hmm.
I'm trying to think which stories would be appropriate, but I'm totally up for it. I can
Um,
think of them.
and then if he were to be a Christian, if he
Yeah,
were to want to believe in God, how would you handle that?
yeah. I guess I'd be, yeah. It wouldn't worry me, to be honest. I'd be surprised. I guess I'd sort of be surprised, but it wouldn't worry me as long as everything else was fine. I'd be, like I said, if he well, if he was a sort of Christian that thought that being gay was bad and you should treat gay people badly, that I'd be upset about that. But if he
Huh?
was the sort of Christian where it didn't affect, yeah, where he was, still a nice person, then
Hmm.
I go, okay, fair enough.
And it's all
Because I know
hypothetical.
he'll
So
disagree with me about all sorts of things, and yeah, he'll disagree
right,
with me about politics and
right, right.
whatever.
As is the way of children. Hmm. So the non-negotiables is really like how you treat somebody. You can believe what you want, but how you treat someone.
Yeah, yeah. Even if he, I guess, belonged to a sect that, or a religion that did think being gay was bad, yeah, as long as he didn't do anything to restrict the rights of gay people,
Yeah, yeah.
that was fine. If he voted for someone who said that's what they're going to do, then I would be upset about.
Huh.
I'd be disappointed at that. But yeah,
Hmm.
the other
Hmm.
thing, I go, well, okay, you can have that as a philosophical thing that I just think is totally wrong, but whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Well, Ashley, you're not crazy. That's what I've concluded.
It'd be sort of fun. Maybe, he could try to convince me that I was wrong all these years. So.
Well, yeah, I was trying. I remember there was a moment in the first part. Well, so when you do you still read the Bible? Is that a thing you do?
Yeah, not often, but sometimes.
Because what it sounds like is it's still you're listening to a lot of other people talk about things or what they believe or
Yeah.
so it's more in like maybe the observational aspect of like curiosity as to why people would think the way that they do versus mm, the more reflective of like what could this be saying to me or
Yeah, I think this is, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to just interrupt you.
no go ahead.
Yeah. To be honest, I think I read the first couple of chapters of Genesis like every so often, because it's a great story. And then it gets boring really quick. Like, I get so excited, oh yeah, I'm gonna read the Bible the whole way through, and then it just gets so tedious. And then a lot of it that's not tedious, it's just like pointless, I think. Like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Mm,
But also, I think there's a lot, yeah, most of it's, there's better things to be reading, I think, than
mm,
a lot of it. And even in the, and I think I read in the past in the past I've read the Bible, but I've read it, so I'm going to move on to other texts. I'm not going to read the same text over and over, because I don't think, yeah, to me it's just another text, like a very influential, good text.
yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah,
in a way, it's more interesting now to read other people's interpretations of it, which is what most people do anyway.
I think so. Yeah,
Because you read through a lot of the books and they don't make a lot of sense even, or something,
mm,
or
mm,
there's so much context involved in what to make of it,
mm, mm,
that it's useful to have. Yeah. So I'll normally read, like I'll hear a podcast or read a thing about, some story, and then go read the story to see how it checks out with what they're saying, and sometimes the thing on either side to check how it fits into the context. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So so I do have a significant amount of Christian listeners. What would you want them to push up against you on, or if they were to take you to task on something, or a challenge you could?
Yeah, it's tough because I don't even know now what would convince me. Yeah.
Huh.
I'd be curious to know, and maybe you can even answer this, what would be your go-to thing, or your fave? Because if I say what would be your favorite argument to convince someone of Christianity, but I think I've heard them and sort of probably reject them, but maybe there's new ones or something. I don't know. In a way, I don't know, because I think I have to be surprised, because I've sort of been through it, enough of it, that it'd have to be something that I haven't considered.
Okay, well, listeners, let's see what you can come up with. Yeah. I think for me, it's the thought that I'm not the only one guiding my development. That, I think, is a huge part of it for me. That of course, there's the community aspect, and the teaching aspect, and the accountability. Like, we're working out, hey, what does this mean for us in together? So actually, it's very vibrant. Like, I love that, the fact that we're it's not just me on the earth learning about things that I find interesting and then figuring out what should I do about that. But there's places to go to work that out with other people. But then there's also just the belief in God, who is over the entire universe. And so he's vast, but then he's also personal. And you see this throughout Genesis. Genesis is a story of individuals having experiences with God, not nations. Even Abraham, he's like, you are going to become a nation, and Israel does come out of him. But at first, it's just these individuals. And so there's in there, this belief that God is vast, but he also is personal. He knows me, and knowable. So this is through the Bible. There's a sense that as I come to it, this is the difference between reading something academically just to kind of know the facts, and reading something religiously is to keep coming back to the same story, believing that there's something in it for me, new and fresh. So I'm just about to start reading the book of Mark again. And I've read it, I don't know, I haven't, not too many times, but I'm really excited to just see, as I live back into the footsteps of Jesus, and seeing what he might be teaching me. And it's very reflective. So I'm writing, okay, this is what stood out to me. And where does that potentially apply in my current life? And how can I live more into that principle? And then prayer, I think, is actually super vibrant for me. Like, it's so I can learn about God, but then I can also talk and have access to that source. So it very well could be just a belief feedback loop that makes me feel nice, and it's just, I just keep kind of coming back. Because we talked a little bit about that in the part one. Well, actually, let me pause. So I'm curious. So those would be some of the things that actually really drive me. I don't know if they would convince you, but they're powerful for me. And I'd be wondering if you have the equivalent, maybe, of some of those things.
I think sometimes that's probably the thing where I think, okay, that's probably the biggest thing. If hypothetically in 10 years' time I was a Christian again, or religious again, that was probably the thing, that the sort of idea of maybe a purpose, or just having this sort of personal thing so you never feel alone, or something like that. Or it's not even that you never feel alone, but it's this sort of a bigger thing, isn't it? That there's this thing there, and I can definitely see the appeal of that. And for one, yeah. Then I think I mentioned before. I don't know. Does does being religious solve that, or do you still get that this sort of these senses, or would I still get these sort of same feelings if I was a Christian? Would I still have the same thing? But now I'm a Christian, and
Hmm.
yeah. So that's one thing. I don't know. Yeah, and the second thing is these are like so the advantages of Christianity, and like I said, in my current worldview, these are things that are inherent in us as human beings, and other religions have them as well, and they have other ways to get to them. So it's a method to get to it. So you just got to find that method. You just got to do the things,
Hmm.
and you just but then yeah,
Hmm.
to get to that, if that makes sense. Yeah, like there's one, does that make you feel better, and there's two, is it true? And they're two sort of,
Hmm.
is this person I'm talking to a real person? In improv, I think I talked a bit about before, sometimes you're doing a scene and stuff is just coming out and you don't
Hmm.
even know it.
Hmm.
And then in some like sects of improv, they call that the moose
Hmm.
for historical reasons. And they go, oh yeah, and they talk. It's just this thing inside you, like that writers have it as well. Don't they have a word for when you write them? Not the muse, anyway. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, the
they call
muse.
it
Yeah, yeah,
they call it the muse. It's like this subconscious part of you that just comes out and it's
yeah.
much smarter than you and doing all these brilliant things that you could never do. Yeah, and like again in my current worldview, it's sort of the same. It's your subconscious and you're
Huh.
accessing the greater part of you
Hmm.
to get to these
Sorry, real brief
things.
pause.
Yeah.
Oh man, this was classic Australian English catching me off guard. Because you would spell that Muse, right?
No,
M-
that's where improv gets it from. No, it's Moose, moose, because it's from Canada.
okay, yeah.
It's a pun on the muse. There you go.
Oh,
I,
okay, okay.
I have heard this 20 years ago. I only now got the pun. That's amazing.
Oh, hilarious. I was
Oh, there
like,
you
what?
go.
Moose? Um,
Yeah.
so Ashley, do you have practices then that you regularly practice to get you into that state? I guess improv but I mean, do you do meditation? Do you
For improv,
no well no, just in your personal life, like um
yeah, I think I probably don't regularly practice it. That's one good thing about religion. It's a formalized thing, so it forces you. Well, it doesn't force you, but there's a system set up for you to do it, even when you don't feel like it. Maybe,
mm, yep.
and you're in a group to do it. So
Mm,
So yeah, sometimes I guess I should do stuff
mm,
when I need it. I guess that I don't.
mm,
Yeah, to
mm.
me, the two practices that I do to get into that state were improv
Rock
and
climbing.
climbing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm,
And sometimes when I think about it, I have other things where I just take the parts of that, the breathing and the analyzing your body, and just I guess standard meditation techniques to try to get
right.
into that if I need to.
Right. Well, so a little bit like during COVID, have you been struggling or have you been
Yeah,
doing
it's been
okay?
tough for me. It's been really, like I said, I thought I'd be fine with COVID because I'm a person who's sort of fairly solitary. But then I've been taken away my two like big mechanisms for, I'd say, coping,
Right.
or for like just connecting to the greater world.
Right.
And yeah, and so now I have to find ways to do that without those two things.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, it's been hard for Christians too. Church is largely irrelevant. It's just a YouTube
Yeah,
church, and it's like, what good is
yeah,
that? It's taken just the intellectual form without the community and the experiential. And it's like that
yeah,
you can't
yeah,
have Christianity when it's just intellect. Um,
yeah,
so I've been feeling that like church in my pajamas in my living room. That is not church.
yeah. Okay, that's interesting. That's really, it never even occurred to me, but of course it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and singing by myself. I don't want to hear that. Um,
Uh,
but there's something very spiritual about a room of people singing, and then when it's just me and Brianna, like, oh man, it's been really
yeah,
hard to feel the corporateness of
yeah,
our faith. Um,
sure.
yeah, yeah. Um, wow.
It's
Well,
really
Ashley,
interesting.
let's. This is great. Um, okay, so a little bit of a challenge out there to you listeners. What would you do to convince Ashley? And you don't have to be a Christian. You can be from another religion, but he's just sitting on his couch waiting for somebody to help him out here. So send him some stuff. We'd love to hear from you. That'd be awesome. And Ashley, if you had one final message to the world, um, what would it be?
If you hear something, experience something, don't say no straight away. Just pause a second and see what happens. Yeah.
Love it. Improv at work. Well, everyone, this has been Ashley Moore. We'll put some links if you want to maybe follow him. One thing about Ashley is he has an awesome Instagram. We'll put links to that there. And if you're in Amsterdam, want to take classes at Easy Laughs, highly recommend, and would love you to have Ashley as your teacher. And Ashley, thanks. Thank you for being here and doing this.
Oh, thank you for having me. It was great fun.
Yeah, and maybe we'll continue the conversation. We'll see if people get back to us. And for all you out there, we would love to hear from you. Do follow us on Instagram at Between Two Worlds Podcast. We're just starting out, but it's getting good. And you've been listening to us. This is a podcast about belief, unbelief, and everything in between. Thank you for listening. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Let us know what you thought of this video. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel or turn on notifications or check out our Patreon page or our social media or do all of them. We're a podcast, so wherever you get your podcasts, give us a listen, whether you're doing the dishes or pooping or walking the dog. We'd love to be there with you. Finally, if you like this video, check out these videos.